welcome to the Aussie Game Podcast, where we talk all things Australian football. Special bonus episode, Mopper here tonight to talk about new CEO of Football Australia. We're also going to touch on the PFA's latest report and their vision for the women's game. And we're also going to touch on the Mariners situation as well, because I know that there's been many people wanting to have a little bit of in-depth analysis on that, mate. So 3 pretty key topics to discuss tonight.
Yeah, it's all happening with Australian football from a strategic direction and also from an operating direction for Central Coast, and all looking forward to talking about these really important topics and where Australian football really sits and probably the vision, where we're going and where we're heading. You've seen some appointments in APL not long ago, and I think this strategically aligns with Football Australia's appointment as well, targeting probably a commercial and marketing and business strategy that is much needed in our game. So they're excited to go through and break down these appointments, and obviously a great report from the PFA and how we can grow the women's game, which I absolutely gladly love to see and read the other day. And yeah, great to talk to you about it and what opportunities lay ahead, because that will be an issue the APL will have to tackle as well as Football Australia.
All right, let's start with Football Australia, mate. They have announced their new CEO, Martin Kugeler. First of all, to you, mate, why do you think he was brought in as the new CEO of Football Australia?
I think if you look at his background and what he offers strategically around the media and structural organisation, I think he's a perfect fit for Football Australia's opportunities and probably, I wouldn't say weaknesses, but some of the areas that we definitely need to improve in. He fits that profile in a nutshell, doesn't he, with his background? You can't just look at Stan. You've got to look at his other reputation before with Bertelsmann, German media private organisation, one of the biggest in Europe. He has great pedigree in these key areas that we really want to work on. He talked about in his press conference too, innovation, marketing, growing the game. I think he's got the skill set for that capability piece. And I think it's really an important offset not to discount Heather's new role, because obviously the focus will be for her, will be the football matters, as well as Martin, of course. But I think she offers a great insight into Australian football and how we want to run it. She talked about that whole operating model that we want to get to. And I think if you've got someone focusing on that, and then you've got the business strategy behind it, because we all know how important finance is within the game. And I think that's what Martin's key focus will be, is to drive that capability, and then we can reinvest in what we need to, which is a key strategy. And I think that's the same for the APL when, Steve got appointed. It's exactly the same, his marketing, because both APL and Australian football have both lost money and continually can't get that high profitability that we need to really reinvest in the key strategies that we all see are important to invest in.
In his press conference, he alluded to a fair few times the work that they need to do hand in hand with the A-Leagues, which we'll get to in a moment. And he also mentioned what his priorities are going to be in his first 100 days in the job. But I just wanted to share a few of the things he said around growth, in terms of he wanted to grow football communities, growing competitions and pathways, the success of our professional teams, growing our supporter fan base, both community engaging with the stories of our teams and players, growing our commercial outcomes, which is what you mentioned there before, and embarking on that path of innovation. So when he was pressed on the innovation piece, he really spoke about how not only kind of in a digital landscape, but how he can support the national teams in terms of preparation for teams and what we do in that space. So I really think that's something that he's going to heavily invest in. I think that it's great that he's kind of starting out on his path, and I, on the back of listening to that press conference, I left it kind of really optimistic about what he can do and what the new structure of Football Australia is going to be in and around him.
It's the connectivity, isn't it? Like the new age fan, I think we've got the entrenched fan, but it's the new base that we need to capture the market on, which we're probably is the biggest opportunity, isn't it? And that media connectivity, technology piece, innovation piece really fits that mold, doesn't it? I'm really excited about that, and I think some really key points with his technology base that you said, not just from a performance point of view. Like I love that portal, how he said around the performance, how we can track players and vice versa and use it
Mm.
for the national coaches. I thought that was really a key point. But, I think if you look at the current technology and innovation and the new age fan and how they connect to a team and utilizing the product, I think that whole marketing point will boost our capability in this space because, like you said, in the media, we really lack a presence. And his strength, I think, will be an absolute perfect fit for trying to build that capability point.
Yeah, and he spoke a fair few times about the commercial outcomes that he will be able to drive, and also gave the example that the football needs to follow. Needs to be the leader in terms of the commercial outcomes, because if there's not a good product on field, makes it a lot harder to sell the national teams in particular commercially. So they need to kind of front on both sides, and I think this is where the development of both his role and Heather Garriock's role is going to come in, because we haven't really seen that type of setup before. I know that there's been some kind of some iterations of it, but I really think that the fact that Heather has her experience, she's had touch points in all parts of the game as a Matilda, as a coach, and then in these kind of business roles as well. So she's touched lots of points within Football Australia, and now she has the chance to sit within that and really operate while Martin drives the outcomes that we're all looking for.
Yeah, the stakeholder relationships is also really key, isn't it? Like he's very personal, isn't he? You can see that in his facade, and and that leadership and talking about togetherness and leadership on that point. He reiterated a lot, which is, and then it already has flown through from Heather too. You've seen the speaking about how connected we have to be to grow. We've heard these big words before, but it's kind of I feel there's a difference in these leadership points. It feels that connectivity seems really important with a purpose this time, and I really feel like in those first 100 days that's on top of his agenda. So it's going to be difficult, with all the stakeholders to get that connectivity. But he clearly knows and understands if we want to continue to grow and build this game forward, that everyone has to play a role. And I think his connectivity and leadership style will suit that down on the ground. And as well as APL Steve, you can also touch on his appointment couple of months ago now, but his strong mindset to deal with these minds. It's like they've collaborated, hasn't it? Like it's come together at the right time. The two stylish leaders of what we currently need as a football country from a business commercial point of view, but also from a leadership point of view. And I think that's really important. And the football people, let them run the football and let the leadership and the business model be the backbone of that.
Yeah, and so let's touch on his comments around the A Leagues. And then you mentioned, he used the phrase hand in hand several times when talking about the A Leagues and how Football Australia can help, but then have a part in what they do. So, and then he talked about leveraging the best opportunity. So that's commercial benefit, fan engagement, player development. I love this line he used of A Leagues is the constant heartbeat while national teams peak throughout the year. So he really understands that if they can get people engaging with their A League teams, throughout the season, then there is the opportunity for national teams when they're home or when they're playing an opponent overseas to be tuning in. So yeah, I thought that was a really nice line that he used. When pressed about the idea of promotion and relegation, he mentioned he's a Hamburg fan, and I think it was Joey Lynch mentioned them kind of going up and down the divisions, but he was very hesitant to. He was almost like not willing to say it's a good idea at all. And so proceed with caution almost, because I think that you know But what's he going to say? I suppose in that press conference, he's not going to come out and say, "Yeah, we're going to have."
Yeah.
He hasn't even started in the role. So, but I think that's going to be part of that first 100 days conversation is about, okay, let's get together. Let's talk about the challenges. Let's talk about the opportunities. How can we collaborate together on these things and have the best of Australian football at the forefront of everything we do?
Yeah, well, he mentioned that it was entertaining and it brings product and numbers and viewership to those certain key points of promo relegation. But he also talked about big clubs falling down under into that relegation zone and not being able to have that sustainable model. So I guess it's the balance between Australia. So, and it's good that he brought up the Australian Championship as well. So he's done his depth, he's done his homework because he talked about the Australian Championship. So he understands that the custodians of all levels play a key part in this because it's not just about the A-League. Yeah, like, I know a lot of questions were about the A-League performance, but really it's about that key point of the pyramid, isn't it? Like what's sustainable for Australia to get marketing growth and get fan engagement, and what model's going to suit that best so the clubs can survive on a sustainability model that will fit both purposes. And I think that's the golden ticket, isn't it, that everybody would like to see, because obviously all clubs want to be involved, at the highest level, but they've just got to have the business model and the opportunity to do so. So it's going to be a difficult decision, but I think, both markets have positive and negatives around both cases.
Yeah, and something I'm going to bring up in just a moment, but I just wanted to touch on what he mentioned around his first 100 days. So it seems to me that the first part of his first 100 days, let's call it the first 50 days, even though I didn't say that, but very much outward looking at all the external stakeholders. So that's going to be the APL, that's going to be the PFA, it's going to be the state federations, that's going to be government, it's going to be infrastructure, it's going to be all these things. So he's looking externally for the first part of it, and then he wants to have a really internal review of where Football Australia is at. So I think it's a really smart approach. He's going to go out there, get a really good sense from all the stakeholders externally that influence the game, and work out, how can we work best together? What are the challenges? How can we come to some kind of common ground on this? And it's all going to be for the benefit of football in Australia. And just towards the end of the press conference, Heather Garriock mentioned the need for a whole of football strategic direction. I love that idea, and we've had so many kind of promises for this type of thing. But if we have a roadmap that illustrates where we're going, and then that way everyone can get on board with it.
Yeah, I think, look, he's got the perfect opportunity to do it, isn't it? Hasn't he? Like a new APL appointment CEO to build relationship with. He doesn't have the broadcast rights in front of his face right now. It's still a couple of years away. We've signed off big sponsorship deals, so again, that he can just leverage off, just trying to build on that. So there isn't a massive need to deal with some bigger other issues that lay down in the future. But what he will have time to do is build that footprint, which will hopefully then elevate and help us build commercial capability further down the track. And this is probably where the groundwork needs to happen. And he's got a perfect window to do it, doesn't he? He's going to bounce into an Asia Cup as well, which is the game's going to thrive off. You've seen how much the World Cup did for obviously the women's sport and football in Australia. And that's probably great timing for the PFA too, with obviously their announcement of the women's league trying to turn professional. So it's all going to come into a nice little flow, I believe. And I think we'll be able to leverage off that and build more capability on that piece. And it's really good that he has this next 12 months just to build those platforms that he needs. And we're finally talking about the key objectives, aren't we? And trying to build around that capability piece rather than looking at the past, like learn from the past, look at the past all you like. But again, what's the future hold, and what initiatives does Football Australia need to do and work in those communities to really leverage off the holistic approach? And I think he's got a perfect 2-year window to do it.
Yeah, I like to your point around that. I like the way he constantly mentioned the word grow in terms of, we have a base, but we want to go forward with it as opposed to fixing anything from the past necessarily. Just want to touch on a few points that Heather made in terms of how her role is going to work. So she is going to oversee competitions, national teams and the technical side of the game. And she also noted that there will be a head of men's and a head of women's football working under her. So how vital do you see Heather Garriock's role in what Football Australia is going to do going forward?
Oh, this is the football element. She spoke about like we've never had this type of role, but it's needed. It's professional football. It's all needed for. You've seen throughout the world these needs for these roles to get the ground roots all the way up to the top. The style of play that she talked about, the way we want to go forward as a nation playing football and developing. We've put some certain things in place, but again, we need to keep building on it. So to have someone just focused on the football needs is crucial, because then we can go do that groundwork through all different levels and all different stakeholders, which you discussed. And I think even more important, a men's and a women's leader of that, which she spoke highly about, because obviously, it's a Australian football's a big nation. It's got a lot of federations, got a lot of to work through. So to have someone for men's program and women's program is only going to be able to enhance what we can do, and getting that connectivity through the whole of the country. So look, I think we're on the right strategic path, aren't we, on all levels now? And I think we can really hopefully leverage off this. Look, the results for the fans and for the community is really going to be in what happens in the next 3 to 4 years to really judge what success it'll be. But at least the foundations are in place, the right leaders are in place, the right people are looking after the right areas. And I think that's a massive positive.
Yeah, I think that and Heather and Martin spoke glowingly of each other throughout the press conference, and you can just tell there's that good working relationship.
The
that we
synergy,
hope.
isn't it? You can see the
Yeah,
synergy. Yeah, and on all levels, I just feel that synergy. I know it's a flashy word, but I I just that personality, that leadership style again, and I think they'll complement each other very well.
yeah, and I think just it's probably needed. It's these roles are probably needed to be split. With former people in these roles, it's probably been a lot to be looking after, and yeah, they're going to have people working under them. But if Martin can drive the strategic overall picture, but then also look for great opportunities, as he said, around commercial outcomes, around innovation as well. Use his, no doubt he's got connections, in Europe and throughout Australia and for everything he's done, and really drive that. And then Heather just completely focuses on the needs and the best outcomes for all the teams. And then even like, as she mentioned, the tournaments as well. So the Australian Championships going to come around end of this year again. And we need to build on what we did last season. It was a good start and we need to keep building on that. So it's good to have someone focused in these areas.
And I can't miss the probably most important point of the conference, and I may be overstating it, but the key message where he said the product of football, you can't drive commercial capability without that product. And that's what's going to be key. And we know on all levels of the product, like you said, not just the Socceroos Matildas, we know how much that they really peak up, but really throughout the whole for the whole custodians of each football club. And if that product's right, then the commercial capability will just continue to come, because the revenue streams will flow on from that. And that's when you can really make profit and really reinvest, which I think will take a few years, because obviously we really need to renegotiate some key points. But again, if we get the platform right and everyone's thinking of that strategic outcome with the product, then the product will sell itself.
The Women's Asian Cup starts 15 days, I think I've done my numbers right, after Martin starts in his role. But I think you mentioned the good parts of, building off the success of the Women's World Cup here in 2023. But I think there's probably a lot of learnings that they took from that tournament as well, where there's opportunities that were missed that can grow the game. And again, this is part of what the PFA have released this week. But I think that's where his role is really going to start. And they mentioned this about, it's Women's Asian Cup and Men's World Cup this year, and then it's flipped around the other way the following year. So there's some big tournaments both here, but it's important that our national teams have success in these tournaments going forward. And that's going to be both of those things. Heather's going to be driving the performance on the field, and and then Martin for his part is going to be dipping in here and there. But on the back of the success, we really need to you know get the best outcomes, particularly commercially.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that's what I credit Heather with the appointment of Joe. Although it took a little bit of time to get him, but you've got to get someone when they're available too, obviously, and it's probably no different to Martin. They're probably maybe we've seen this 9-month gap because we had to get the right person, but not will we know the whole process. But again, if you get the right people in the right positions, we've got a fantastic chance to leverage off this Asia Cup, and hopefully we can be successful and win it. Look, our Matildas are in prime for this event on home soil, so that'll be their goal. And we've seen the Australians win the men in the Asia Cup, and like you said, the learnings of marketing and promoting after the fact and really leveraging off that. We've always peaked and dropped off, haven't we? But if that's the key learnings, you got a marketing guru in there that's going to be able to utilize that media skill and organizational skill to hopefully promote that. So, and it might be a great timing for the Ninja A-League. I just think this is the perfect timing with the PFA report going into an Asia Cup, if we're successful, to go professional, where you're going to get people backing women's sport and women's football. You've got the biggest team probably in the country that's followed with the Matildas. We've seen that through viewership all throughout when they were at the World Cup, and the Socceroos right up there as well. You're not going to get a better opportunity to go bang and just leverage off that. So, look, I think it's very exciting times for the women's game, and I think that PFA report's come out at the right time.
All right, let's touch on that because it was something that Heather Garriock acknowledged the work that the PFA had done into the research and potential benefits of investing in the A-League women's and making it fully professional. So the PFA released a vision for the A-League women, and they've labelled it ready for takeoff. And there's kind of 4 key pillars behind it, but I'll just read you a couple of pieces from the website, and then we can discuss what it all means and where the opportunities are. So in 2025, we can point to clear evidence in the Matildas, women's football overseas, and other women's sports in Australia to demonstrate the immense potential of the A-League women's, where women athletes have been treated as elite professionals and given a platform to shine. Exponential growth in support has followed. The exclusive market research supporting this vision suggests the A-League women will be no different. The vision identifies the critical elements that will shape the league's trajectory, grouped into 4 strategic pillars. Fit for purpose governance is number 1. Number 2 is effective fan engagement. Number 3 is a reformed football economy. And number 4, a suitable match day infrastructure. I'll take you through some of the other kind of things in a bit, mate. But what are your initial thoughts on reading this, and I suppose where are the opportunities? It's all well and good to do this research, I suppose, but the key part of it for me is that who's going to take it by the reins and put it into place.
Oh, absolutely, and I think they're blessed because they've had a new appointment in both APL and Football Australia. So it's going to go right to the top of the tree, this one. It's the only probably thing that's needed, or what the opportunity is always going to be the number one, which is the cash driver, the financial commitment behind it. Who is going to financially get this going, and who can we draw in? Like we've heard in, there's people willing to back it, but I haven't heard from the key stakeholders who those people are. So we need, if we've got that financial backing, then we could probably, go straight away. I think leverage off the Asia Cup for that. But who are those key stakeholders that are going to get it? Because what do you think? The women's sport's going to need what? Each club's going to need probably 1 to 3 million just to get the basics of payments and all that kind of stuff. So across the board, then that's a huge investment, and you're going to have to get someone to sponsor it, and with the caliber to back that financially. So I think, like anything in sport, and we've also got to look at the finances of the APL and Football Australia. They're not making money, so if they get a backer and they're right behind it, and I'm sure both APL and Football Australia will jump on it. Every point that's in there makes complete sense. The women's game is growing. It's there. We've seen the Matildas engagement. It'll flow on through, and it'll be able to make them professional. The infrastructure will always need work, but that's no different to probably even the Women's Premier League right now, and where they're playing that. I don't think they've reached that level yet. They're still growing over there as well, but you've seen how quickly it can take off, and I think they'll be well supported. And it's just that financial cog who fits that bill, because we could really get this going straight away if we had the financial capital to do it.
Just on the infrastructure piece, I think it's important to mention that I think these, and we've seen a lot of this in the Australian Championship, and we've seen a lot in the A-League as well, but these fit-for-purpose stadiums based on your attendance, because if we're drawing 1,500 or 2,000 to a game, and we put it in an Allianz Stadium, it's like pointless. Like, you're going to drive your costs up and all these kinds of things. So it's almost like we can grow the infrastructure while we grow the game as well. These were some of the highlighted recommendations that the APL of the 21. I'm just going to paraphrase a few of these, but basically establishment of an independent commission for the A-Leagues, new minimum standards for A-League women's clubs, relaunch of a fully professional A-League women's following the 2026 AFC Women's Asian Cup. So I suppose in line with the next season, targeting growing women's football revenues on and off the pitch, implementing revenue sharing among A-League women's clubs to foster greater collaboration and financial sustainability, establishing a more effective club licensing program agreed by some external stakeholders, prioritising the return of the golden generation of Matildas, and developing a national football infrastructure body to engage government. This was one that wasn't included in their kind of short list of recommendations, but I think this is a really key one. It was basically FA's role within the A-Leagues is clearly defined, because we know they have a vested interest in the A-Leagues, and we know that the success of the competition is going to be of benefit to Football Australia. But I think it's really important for everyone to understand where Football Australia come in and where they oversee and where they're not involved. But I think that was a good point made around not just for the women's game, but the men's game as well.
Oh, absolutely. We discussed this at great length, and it's the governance, isn't it? The governance and the structure that they have to comply to try to create that structure that they can work towards. And it's interesting looking at other leagues and how they do it. Each Europe, UK, they're all different in their own models. But what's going to be best suit Australia? And I think this is the big question for me, for Martin, is clearly defining what role they do play and where do they sit in the decision making, or is it the governance, or is it both? Because the APL needs some kind of governance, and if they're talking about independent commissions to run it, that's fine. But again, that's another layer of governance. So we've really got to get that pyramid right if we're going to all succeed together, because we've seen the divide and it doesn't work. So I think if Football Australia, once they figure out what that best practice is going forward, they're going to have to try to sell it to the APL. Because realistically, I know a lot of questions for Martin and Heather are regarding the A-League. But again, what role is it that they clearly want and what they want them to do? And they need to clearly define that on both levels.
Yeah, completely agree. I think it's an interesting point, and this was part of the documentation that was released by PFA, but it's almost like the A-League women sits in this kind of weird Venn diagram or something similar, where it's like they're competing both with the flourishing domestic competitions in Australia, like talking about the NRLW, the AFLW, women's cricket, WBBL, netball. So they're competing like with local talent and here, because if you're a talented young player and you get thrown double your contract here and you could go either way, you're not going to begrudge someone for like taking that opportunity. So there's one element there, but then there's also the overseas element as well, because if you're a talented footballer and you want to pursue your career in football and you get an offer to go to Sweden, for example, let's say, that's kind of where you want to go. So it's like the A-League Women's is left in this kind of funny little spot, and all of these research says that yes, this is what we need to do, and it just makes sense. It's the problem again is who is going to back it. But if there is massive
Yeah.
opportunity if they do.
It's important to note too that a lot of the sports that you spoke about are running at an operating loss for the
Mm,
long-term game of women in
yeah.
sport. You look at all those key markets are all pretty much running at a loss to get the long-term gain because in 5 or 10 years' time it'll pay for itself. So again, it needs that commitment, doesn't it? I think it's real big for the government as well. Like I think the government has a role to play in this to get women in sport and play a higher role, like of investment. And it's not just in investments in the markets of the sporting organisations, but in the infrastructure throughout the country, because obviously the boost that we've seen for women's sport over the last 10, 15 years, the infrastructure needs to be able to keep up with it.
Yeah, and like again, we talk about this kind of flow and effect, and similar to the levels we talked about, the A leagues and then Football Australia and how that kind of works, because a stronger A League women's competition is going to produce players that stay in the league until they are ready to go overseas, and then when they go overseas, they thrive, which then makes them better Matildas, which then leads to better success for the Matildas, then drives commercial outcomes. So it's like, I know I've kind of drawn a long bow there, but it's like, yeah, you kind of got to start at the start, and we're not real like we've probably seen, like, let's be fair, like the Matildas have kind of stagnated a little bit. Like we love the Matildas and they've done so well in tournaments, but other countries that have invested more in their women's program that weren't ahead of us 5, 10 years ago probably are now. And that's the reality of it.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And the reflection at home for the semi-professional league that we've got now is you're seeing. No, we talk about the young players in the men's league. Well, look at the women's. They're
Yeah.
14, 15, 16 playing and going to school. So can you imagine if we provided them with a structure, which the report identifies, and it's a really good report and it identifies those key points. So I think it'll only expedite the women's game, and there's enough numbers in there. We've always had the numbers, haven't we, with participants? If you've got participants and you're winning that game, the challenge then becomes the next step. And to convert them, you need to be able to sustain those numbers all the way through. And the choices will be made simply based on what you give them with facilities and leagues that you can grow from. And like you said, there's a lot of young kids in there at such a young age, and it's a bit of a gap, isn't it? Like you've got some really experienced players as well, but you've seen it on both men and women, the benefits and the challenges both face within both leagues.
Yeah, and the PFA CEO Bo Bush, just going to read a couple of quotes from him because I think it really ties everything together quite nicely. The players alone cannot bring this vision to life. It requires the clubs, the APL, FA, government, broadcasters, and sponsors to join us and match our members' desire for progress. This vision is an open invitation to all who believe in the incredible potential of women's football in Australia and New Zealand. So I just thought that was, and look, as I said, it's about who comes in now. Like it's an open invitation. It's like, we've done all the work for you. This is the opportunity. It's like, who's on board? Like who's, to borrow their tagline, who's ready for takeoff?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, look, hopefully we can get that independent commission to really. You need the starters, don't you, to work on now this report, and there we wish them well, and we hopefully that financial capital that's been talked about is real, and there's a real massive opportunity. You can see how far the Matildas have come in such a short space of time, and what they demand from a marketing and capital point of view. We just need to spread that all the way down, and with that, have a nice, stable. Doesn't have to be the Women's Premier League; it never will be, but a good competition for our players to grow from, and clubs that can develop and push on in their careers to obviously get financial return for that capital that they've invested in.
Yeah, it's a good point around the investment in the Matildas because I think part of it is financial, obviously, but part of it is just I think of a change in attitude as well as where the Matildas actively going out, spending time with their fans and being there before the game, being there post game for as long as it takes and like look at the love that they get everywhere they go, particularly in Australia. But you know, these players are just household names now and without
Yeah.
the investment that just doesn't happen. So there is a massive opportunity. It's just
Not just on a national stage, on a world stage. Sorry to interrupt, but they are household names of the world.
yeah.
You've seen
Yeah.
with Mary Fowler, like they're just the options are endless, and that's the capital that can be bought in and really developed off. But yeah, exciting times, great report, and yeah, I think the future with this blueprint can definitely be worked on and critiqued, and yeah, brought to life, or like you said, ready for takeoff.
All right, let's finally, mate, touch on the Mariners because you and I have had some conversations, and we probably think that some of the reporting on it has been just overhyped, and really, like, we just want to kind of deal with the facts of what has happened. So let's just go through a little bit of a timeline, mate. So Monday, 12th January, the APL takes over the management of the Mariners on an interim basis while a sales process is completed. The operator of the Mariners notified the APL of the forfeiture of the club participation agreement, and with this, the APL has taken the proactive action to terminate the club participation agreement. Now, there were reports in and around that the Mariners Academy had gone into liquidation, and there were fears for the 2026 season. Thursday, the APL came out and said they've got every intention of the Mariners Academy continuing for the 25-26 season. Appreciate the last few days has been unsettling and have inconvenienced many with season planning underway and school holiday clinics upcoming. We want to assure you all we are working as quickly as possible to ensure the Academy is up and operating shortly. We will provide a further update with you all next week. That one was signed off by Steve Rosich, the APL CEO. Friday, they signed Chris Donnell. Just wanted to mention, as it's maybe people think this is a bit of a funny thing to say, but when Chris Donnell signed, the social media, proper graphic and proper kind of advertising around what had happened. Whereas some people might remember when Mark Jackson left, it was a still image of him with a plastered Mariners logo on it. And people might think, yeah, whatever, it's just a graphic. But I think it really spells to what's happening at the club. So I think already there's some kind of things happening there. And then there was on the Saturday, the 17th of January, there was a note to all parents in regards to the holiday clinics with an update. They then had to deal with the waterlogged pitch against MacArthur, and then they provide a further update for the academy on Sunday, basically a mid-step, just to say, look, we're still working on it, and there'll be more updates later this week. And then the men's side had a 1-1 draw with MacArthur. The women's side had a 1-1 draw with Perth Glory, and just today they've signed Nathaniel Blair from Perth Glory. So all been happening at the Mariners, but I think, like, just to wrap it all up, I think it seems like they've stepped in when they've needed to, and if anything, the communication and the transparency has really lifted since they've been operating, and it just seems to me like they're just managing a process towards a sale. And look, I might be naive in thinking that, but I just think that that's what's happening, and I'd just love to see this continue until the sale is done, and then whoever comes in does the right thing by the club. So I've said my bit, mate. What do you want to say on the matter?
Oh, look, your points are very valid, and like this high level communication, hopefully that Steve Rosich has brought in, is hopefully what we're looking forward to in the future. I think if they've gone in, then they've had to act, and we've seen the warning signs of this prior with Central Coast, and they've had to make some big decisions. And if it's for the right outcome, then it had to happen. They wouldn't have gone in unless they had to necessarily go in. And we know the links with the liquidation under the agreement had both parties, the academy and the football club, in there. So that had to happen, which they clarified. Does it disrupt things? Absolutely. But does it put some more forward thinking and clarity around ownership in the Central Coast Mariners for the next 20 years or their future? Then probably yes. They need someone professionally to own them, that can back them, that can build capability rather than hearing about all the struggles and the ups and downs that they have. This club is successful and will be successful. 11 trophies, I think it was, someone mentioned. They've done a terrific job with the academy. The people within there have worked within all these challenges and delivered that outcome. So credit to them. But again, from an ownership point of view, we need financial capability and stability for that to grow. And I don't think there's been a year that we haven't talked about the challenges of that from the Mariners' point of view. So look, if there's a better organisation ownership model that can be brought forward, we've seen some really strong models that have taken over some A-League clubs and they're thriving. So hopefully this next investment will guarantee the Mariners' future, and it'll stop the inconsistency and talk of the ups and downs and really provide a professional platform for the Mariners to build on within the future.
We did ask for some comments in regards to this podcast we're doing and A-League Tactics on X. I'm just going to paraphrase what they wrote, but basically saying that they're surprised that the Mariners are in this situation because when they started following the league, that they were thriving and they were a successful club. And I think it almost answers the same question because we've just seen throughout their history, we've seen the ups and downs. They were really competitive. They were grand finalists in their very first season, and then they had a dip, and then they were back, and they beat the Wanderers. I think it was about 2012 or so, and then they've kind of have a bit of a lull again, and they're back, winning a championship and then winning a treble in the next season. So there's a great documentary. I'm not sure it's still on Paramount Plus, but it's called Best Little Club in the World or Greatest Little Club in the World or something along those lines. But I would, anyone who doesn't know the Mariners story, I would encourage you to watch that, and it just really gives you the sense of what they are. And they are a community club that punches above their weight more often than not. They've just struggled financially for a long time. But, as you've said before, mate, if they have an investor there that's willing to invest in the long term, but lose some money in the short term for that long term aspiration, I think they're going to benefit from that. And, in the commentary in the game against MacArthur, the guys on the commentary mentioned, players only just getting paid like a couple of days before the game and coaches, maybe the morning of or still hadn't been paid or something along those lines. So, you got to feel for
That's not professional.
You got to feel for people involved in that. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, like you want assurances if you're going to go play for the Mariners, and if someone's going to invest long term, that's ideal.
And I'm sure these previous investors that had them, only had the best interests, but they didn't have the operating capital to stop that unprofessionalism, semi-professionalism, and just provide that outcome, did they? And well, it couldn't be seen anyway. So I think they've acted, whether we like it or not. It's a business in the end, isn't it? And it's got to be made a business model. So the on-field stuff that they do so well on still succeeds. But yeah, look, we knew at the start of the year there was problems. And again, I think they're just been addressed. There's no perfect timing, whether it's in season or out of season for these matters. But the main thing is that they find someone, and clearly that's what they're working towards, that has that long-term vision and puts all this to bed, and so they can just get back to running the business and get that community model back, and seeing the best out of the Central Coast Mariners that we've seen for the last 20 years.
Yeah, and they've probably brought in more players in. Speaking about the men's team, they've probably brought in more players in January than they did in the off season. So hopefully, that's an indication that they're starting to even push forward in these early moments. But we want an investor into that club that's going to keep it sustainable longer term and do the right thing by the club and do the right thing by that Mariners community, who a lot of them have been rusted on and gone through some pretty tough times, but they continue to turn up, which is great.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, there's been some three big key topics tonight, and if you've got any questions, or I'd love to hear your views on what's Australia football or Football Australia's first steps. What would you like to see them do first? If you got some recommendations on when the Women's League should turn professional, or what your thoughts on that, please send us your views or any Central Coast feedback. Give us a feedback and we'll discuss it some points on Sunday's show. But love to hear from the viewers around what your thoughts around what to do first and where the game's going. And are these three big things that are happening right now heading in the right direction?
Yeah, well said, Mopper. Yeah, we'd love to hear from everyone. Please share your thoughts. And when we're back recording on Sunday, we'll be happy to go through anything that we receive. But look, big weekend of football coming up. Never stops, as you always say, Mopper. But we'll be back to record on Sunday to go through all of that with you. So in the meantime, enjoy football.
All the best, everyone.